Welcome back to Behavior and Environment. This is video part 6. We're continuing with Objective 16. And Objective 16 is define topographical response class and discriminate between examples and non-examples. 17, define functional response class and discriminate between examples and non-examples. 18, define stimulus class. 19, list ways to classify stimuli. And 20 will be classify stimuli based on their form, function, and temporal relation to behavior. Alright, Objective 16, define topographical response class, discriminate between examples and non-examples. So, a topographical response class consists of two or more responses of a similar form. They don't have to be exactly alike. Responses don't need to be identical to be members of the same topographical response class. And the responses have different effects on the environment, but the form remains constant. Alright, I'll give you some examples here of topographical response classes. Jumping to reach an item high on the shelf at the grocery store. Jumping to place an item back on the shelf. Or jumping to grab the pull-up bar at the gym. Now, there's a different consequence produced by each of these instances of jumping. So, they have different effects. Okay, so they're members of different functional response classes, but they're the same topographical response class because they all look the same. They take the same form, jumping. They're all just jumping with some slight variation, right? For example, jumping to grab the pull-up bar at the gym, you're going to jump up with both hands, but maybe jump to reach an item high on the shelf, you're going to reach with one hand, but we're focusing on the jumping part here. Point to ketchup at the dinner table, point to a plane in the sky, point to the criminal at the lineup when asked who did it. Alright, different effects on the environment, but it's pointing. Those are just pointing responses, so those are members of a topographical response class. They have the same form, but different functions in the environment. As if you'll notice now, it's the same response, but in different contexts in the presence of different stimuli. So, and so the consequent stimuli, that is the change in the environment produced by the response, is what's different for these members of the topographical response class. What's the same is they look the same, have the same form or structure. So saying juice when asked what do you want, or when seeing a box of juice on the counter you say juice, or when asked what do you drink this morning you say juice, or when asked tell me something you drink that is sweet you say juice, right? So the stimuli here that precede and follow the response differ, but the form of the response is constant. So that's a topographical response class. Kicking a vending machine, kicking an attacker, kicking a soccer ball. Let's contrast that with functional response class and discriminate between examples and non-examples. So a functional response class consists of two or more formally dissimilar responses with the same effect on the environment. So you have two or more formally dissimilar responses, so they look different, but they produce the same consequence in the environment. So I'm just saying this a little bit differently, but I'm saying the same thing. So the responses have the same effect on the environment. That's what's critical here. Two or more responses with the same function. That's why they're a functional response class. And so the topographies vary. There's always two or more topographies within a functional response class. If we're only talking about one topography and its function or its effect on the environment, then we're not talking about a class of responses, so we're not talking about a functional response class. So you have two or more topographies that have the same effect on the environment. The topographies vary. That's a description of a functional response class. So here are some examples. Escaping a noisy room by walking out, putting on headphones, or asking someone to be quiet. Notice or assume for a moment that the effect of each of those responses is the same, but notice the responses take a different form. Or getting an apple from a tree by climbing a ladder, or asking someone else to climb it for you, or shooting it with a gun and it falls down so you can get it, or hitting it with your shoe. Different topographies, right? But the same outcomes. Getting a teacher's attention by crying, yelling, hitting another student, or saying, "Excuse me." They all have the same effect, so they're all teacher-getting behavior. and they're all a functional response class. And remember from earlier, in an earlier video part, I said behavior is defined by its effect on the environment, right? And so when you have responses that have different effects on the environment, those are different behaviors. Well, I'm saying something very similar here, right? So we have different responses that have the same effect on behavior here. So because they have the same effect, they're all the same behavior. But if we look across the three, these are three behaviors, right? Although I've listed like 9 or so or 10 different topographies or responses here, there's only 3 behaviors or 3 functional response classes. This one is behavior that produces escape from noise. This is behavior that produces an access to an apple. This is behavior that produces access to a teacher's attention. Avoiding a bully by putting on sunglasses, turning away when you pass the bully, or pretending to faint when the bully's around. All right, functional response class. Asking for a break from a classroom assignment by exchanging a flashcard that says break, signing break, or saying break please. All right, let's do some ASRs. 2 types of response classes are A, functional and topographical, B, response and behavior, C, form and function, or D, none of these. A couple more seconds. Alright, I'll close the poll. The response classes are functional and topographical. ASR 33. Playing the guitar with your feet and playing the guitar with your hands comprise A, a topographical response class, B, a functional response class, or C, both. A couple more seconds. Alright, I'll close the poll, and the answer here is B, functional response class, because we have 2 topographies, playing with your feet or playing with your hands. Both produce sound from the guitar, so they both have the same effect on the environment, so they're members of a functional response class. ASR 34, clapping to applaud, clapping to wake someone up, clapping because someone said clap your hands, are members of a topographical response class, A, functional response class, B, or both, C. A couple more seconds. Alright, I'll close the poll. The answer here is A, topographical response class. They have the same form, it's clapping, but they have different effects on the environment. ASR 35. Running out of a burning building and running to the ice cream truck to buy a snow cone are members of a topographical response class, A, functional response class, B, or both, C. A couple more seconds. Alright, I'll close the poll. And because these responses have different effects on the environment, but they look the same, they comprise a topographical response class. Alright. Objective 18, define stimulus class. A stimulus class is any group of stimuli sharing a predetermined set of common elements in one or more dimensions. Any group of stimuli sharing a predetermined set of common elements in one or more dimensions. So in other words, 2 or more stimuli that have shared features in a particular dimension or multiple dimensions. And so let's look at that in more detail in Objective 19, listing ways to classify stimuli. So dimensions on which stimuli can be classified can include their physical or formal dimensions or characteristics, so size, color, temperature, weight, intensity. Temporal, in other words, their occurrence in time, so typically in relation to behavior. Or 3, their functional characteristics or their effects on behavior. You can also classify them based on their functional characteristics in terms of the effects of those stimuli on other stimuli. Okay, so dimensions on which you can classify stimuli or define stimulus classes are physical, temporal, functional. Stimuli in formal response classes share a common physical characteristic. They're all round, or they're all blue, or they're all wet, or they're all dry, or they're all metal, right? Stimuli and temporal response classes occur at a similar point in time relative to other events. So either they occur after certain events, before, or at the same time as other events. Stimuli and functional response classes have the same effect on the environment. Okay. I meant to say behavior. If I said environment, stimuli and functional response classes have the same effect on behavior. Okay. So let's look at formal stimulus classes. So you can have red cups, red pens, red blocks. Together they form a stimulus class of red things. Marble, soccer ball, cantaloupe. Together they form a stimulus class of round things. Wooden chair, wooden leg, wooden log. Those are wooden things. Salty chips, salty popcorn, salty seawater. Salty things. Okay, so formal stimulus classes. Examples of temporal stimulus classes. An antecedent. Antecedent is a stimulus that occurs before a response occurs or before behavior occurs. So before the teacher dismisses class, the bell rings. Before the dispenser releases a pellet, it makes a grinding sound. So let me give you some context there. In the experimental analysis of behavior, researchers study fundamental principles of behavior, sometimes using animal models, so for example, using rats or pigeons or mice, and they put them in a box, and the box is connected to a computer, and the animal presses the lever, and it releases food pellets or juice or water, and the researcher studies the effects of, for example, food or juice or water on lever pressing, so the effect of consequences on behavior. And then and usually in those arrangements, when the animal, let's say a rat, presses a lever and it releases a food pellet, there's a motor and some gears that are going to activate when the rat presses the lever and it releases a food pellet into the box where the rat is. And so that's what's meant by before the dispenser releases a pellet, it makes a grinding sound. For the teacher dismissing class, and the bell rings, so the bell rings, that's the antecedent, and then the teacher dismisses class. So before the food, this dispenser releases a pellet, first it makes a grinding sound, so the grinding sound is the antecedent. Before the microwave is done, it dings. It dings and then it turns off, right? And then the microwave dinging is the antecedent for your behavior of going over to the microwave and checking on your food. Consequent, or consequence. So when I throw the ball, you catch it. When I strike the match, it burns. When you send an email, Gmail says sent. So the sent, the burning match, and you catching the ball when I throw it, those are consequences for the behavior of throwing the ball, striking the match, or sending an email. Those are temporal stimulus classes. So let's look at functional stimulus classes. Now I'm going to give you an example here of swinging. So let's say a boy is swinging on the swing, and you say, "Hey, how high can you go?" And the boy starts to swing higher. Okay, when the boy swinging higher is the effect of you saying, "Hey, how high can you go?" So you say, "How high can you go?" and he evokes the boy swinging faster and higher. Or let's say you're in a car with someone and they're driving slow, and you say, "Hey, hurry up, I'm going to be late." And then they hit the gas and they start driving faster, right? So in both cases, the antecedent of either you saying, "How high can you go?" or "Hey, hurry up, I'm going to be late." In both cases, they result in someone doing something faster. Okay, so although the topography if you think of the boy swinging as the behavior, and the person pressing the gas and speeding up in the car is the behavior. Then you saying, how high can you go? Or, hey, I'm going to be late, speed up. Those are antecedents that have the same effect on those behaviors. It makes them speed up. Okay, so that's why what you're saying in that case, it consists of a functional stimulus class with respect to the boy and the person driving. Okay, so let me give you another example here. So the boy touches the hot stove and gets burned, and in the future he doesn't touch the stove again when it's hot. Or the boy puts his finger in the power outlet and gets shocked and doesn't touch it again in the future. Now in both circumstances, there was a consequence. The consequence decreased the future probability that the boy would repeat that behavior. For example, either touching this hot stove or putting his finger in the power outlet. Now, because those consequences had the same effect on behavior, that is, they decrease the future likelihood that the behavior will happen again, then they have the same function on those different topographies. So those consequences consist of a functional stimulus class. Okay, in another, we would call them those stimuli as functioning as punishment, essentially. Okay, and so let me give you a non-example. Okay, so let's say a dog pees on the floor in the house, and then you spray it with water, and you say, bad dog. And he never peed in the house again. The dog barked at the neighbors, and you said, no barking, and shook your finger. But the dog continued to bark at the neighbors in the future. Now notice the consequences have different effects, right? In one case, the consequence decreased the future probability that the dog will pee on the floor in the house. In the other circumstance, the consequence had no effect on the dog barking at the neighbors in the future. So those consequences are stimuli with different effects on the behavior, so they don't comprise a functional stimulus class. They have different effects on behavior. But notice that those stimuli were produced by the dog's behavior, right? And they're different consequences, so we would say the dog examples consist of two behaviors. And those stimuli occurred after the behaviors occurred, so they comprise a temporal stimulus class. They're consequences. Okay? And we might even say they also comprise a formal stimulus class in that they're both vocal utterances from a human when the dog engaged in the behavior. But they're not functional stimulus classes because they had different effects on the behavior of the dog. Okay. So objective 20 is to classify stimuli based on their form, function, and temporal relation to behavior. So ASR 36. A plastic bowl, a plastic spoon, a plastic chair are stimuli best classified as formally A, or temporally B, functionally C, or all of the above D. Give you a couple more seconds. Alright, I'll close the poll, and the answer here is A, formally. ASR 37. When you put your hand under the automatic dryer in the public restroom, hot air comes out. When you flip the light switch, the light turns on. You ask me to stop eating with my mouth open, and I close my mouth. The hot air, the light on, the closing my mouth are stimuli best classified as A, formally, B, temporally, C, functionally, or D, all of the above. Give you a few more seconds. Alright, I'll close the poll. And the answer here is B, temporally. Temporally is best because they all occur before the response and they have different effects on behavior. Okay. ASR 38. I show you a blue card, a blue toy plane, and a blue hat. They are best classified as A, formally, B, temporally, C, functionally, or D, all of the above. Couple more seconds. Alright, I'll close the poll. The answer is A, formally. ASR 39. You were walking down the sidewalk quickly, heard someone scream, and then you stopped suddenly. You were brushing your teeth, and an item fell off the shelf which caused you to stop brushing. The scream and the item falling are stimuli best classified: A, formally; B, temporally; C, functionally; or D, all of the above. Give you a couple more seconds. Alright, I'll close the poll. The answer here is C, functionally. Functionally is best because although they are antecedents, they have the same effect on behavior. Alright, objective 21. We will begin in the next video part. See you then.